Hi, good afternoon. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Nasher. I'm Curator of Education, Anna Smith, and today it's my pleasure to introduce artist Matthew Ronay. Ronay last spoke here in 2018, presenting a talk that covered everything from mushrooms and brain science to Henri Rousseau and cannibalism. Fun fact, it's one of the most commented on videos on the Nasher's YouTube channel. Today, Matthew Ronay joins us in conjunction with his striking installation, The Crack, The Swell, and Earth, an Ode, which has filled our lower level gallery with a parade of highly saturated biomorphic forms and has been delighting guests at the museum since late October. The title of Ronay's talk for today is, similarly, an array of compelling terms that are sure to draw us in and pique our interest. Architect-builder, meditative conjuring via drawing, spiritual minimalism, euphoric transcendence, a book-sharing experiment. Ronay has exhibited at institutions including Kunsthalle Lingen, Germany, University of Louisville, Artspace San Antonio, Serpentine Gallery, Sculpture Center New York, Center for Curatorial Studies Bard College, Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art, Kentucky Museum of Art and Craft, Louisville, and Parasol Unit Foundation for Contemporary Art, London. Ronay participated in the 2013 Lyon Biennale, curated by Gunnar Kvaran, and the 2004 Whitney Biennial. In 2016, his work was the subject of solo presentations at the Blaffer Art Museum, Houston, and the Pérez Art Museum, Miami. At the end of today's presentation, I invite you all to join us upstairs where the artist will be signing copies of the stunning exhibition catalog for The Crack, The Swell, and Earth, an Ode. But now, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Matthew Ronay.
Hi, everybody. First, I want to thank the Nasher for hosting my exhibition and to the contributors to make it happen, including the book and everything else. Thank you so much for your contribution to my exhibition. One second. So normally, I think some artists, when they give a lecture, they will stand up here and tell you, I did this, I did that, I began this, I changed materials, blah, blah, blah. I find that insufferable. And so I usually take this time to show you other people's art and to kind of hope that you understand that what I'm showing you actually relates to my art. So instead of saying directly, this is what my work is about, I'm saying this is what I find interesting in other people's work, which is also a thread that I hope is in my own work. So to begin with, I think it's important to tell you that I have a pretty hermetic practice, meaning I'm a person who rides my bicycle. I live in New York. I ride my bicycle from Brooklyn to Queens to my studio, and I come home, and then I hang out with my wife, Bengu, and we talk and watch movies. And I prefer to be in the studio, and so that has severely limited the amount of art that I see in person. And so as a result, I've become a book collector. And this is how I learn about art history, and it's how I learn about, contemporary art in general. And so I may have a particular bent to look into the past because these are the things that have been published. And so almost all the imagery I'm going to show you was either photographed by me or in books that I own myself, minus a few images of Shaker villages in Kentucky and some other things that I shot with my iPhone. So without further ado, I'll begin. Okay, so because of the hermetic nature of what I do, let's see, how can I explain this? I work in my studio in wood, and I do a lot of different things, installations. I make discrete works, and one of my favorite things to do, or actually the most important thing about my practice, is that it leads me to be able to learn about the world and about what other people have done. I think this is, for fans of art, I think what's interesting to them is to view and look and think about the intentionality of the artist. But for the players of art, I think the most important thing is how am I using my practice to learn about myself, to better myself, to learn about the world, etc. And so I just wanted to begin by showing you some images of my work, so at least if you're completely unfamiliar, you can understand that this is the visual of what I do. All these sculptures are made from basswood. I work alone. I don't work with assistants. Not that I'm celebrating that. It's just that I actually really enjoy the craft of what I do, and I think it's something that centers me psychologically. And so I wanted to at least just share with you at the outright of this lecture some images of what I do. Okay, so one of the important concepts that I've learned about myself through the thinker Justin Biel is that there are kind of two people inside me. One person is a drawer, and one person is a maker. And so my friend Justin was explaining that originally architects were the thinker and the builder. And then as time went on and they specialized, architects make plans or come up with ideas, and builders figure out how to do it. And he had pointed out to me that it appears that I work in a similar fashion. So what that means is that all of everything that I do starts with drawing. I doodle, I tinker, I do what I do without judgment, without panicking, without worrying. And then, I'm not really thinking, how can this become sculpture? It's purely about how can I expand the visual language of what I've been participating with. There's another person inside of me, the builder or the maker, the craftsperson, that enjoys the making and figures out how to translate these drawings into actual objects that can stand on their own and not fall apart and not be broken. And because of that relationship, I think I really got attracted to the Vienna Werkstatt. And so the Vienna Werkstatt was a movement that starts around 1900 in Vienna. And it's founded by these two men, Joseph Hoffman and Coleman Mosher. And so these guys, the particular point in history is interesting because the grand bourgeoisie are kind of hoping for a new way to kind of express their interiors and their inner lives, and they don't want to go with, classical Rococo or these kinds of things. They're looking for something new. And at the same time, you have to think also industrialization is like about to hit full steam. And so your traditional craftspeople have actually been kind of embarrassed because everything that they studied for in their guilds and everything, I'm talking jewelry making, glass blowing, metalworks, carpentry, these kinds of things, ceramics, have basically become semi-obsolete because everything's being mass-produced in factories, or at least it's on its way there. So these guys come along, and their architectness is that they think up these incredible ideas in drawing, and then they pass them on to craftspeople who are able to make their exact ideas become real. So the craftspeople have their dignity restored, and the designers or the architects also get to let their minds go completely free. And to me, the Vienna Werkstatt is such an amazing universe, like a great paradigm of this example. People who want to think of new and exciting ways to come up with interiors and design, and craftspeople who need to be employed. So the Vienna Werkstatt goes all the way from architecture, ironwork, furniture, and I'm talking complete interiors, wallpaper, stained glass, carpets, mirrors, flatware, glass, metalware, etc. From something traditional as hammered metal to something kind of high-tech, which would be stamped metal. This is a basket for gathering flowers. You have to understand kind of the absurdity of this. To us now, okay, maybe it seems a little banal, but it's like, imagine commissioning someone to create this as a flower basket for you. I think for me, it's so exciting. The relationship between the patron, the idea maker, and the craftspeople, everyone is fulfilled. The patrons get their wildest fantasies, the designers get to let themselves go free, and then the craftspeople get to do what they trained to do. Amazing lamps. Let's see, we'll get to, as I said, wallpaper. To textiles, this is a Coleman Mosher to go with my previous lectures, a beautiful textile example of fungi. Even fashion, jewelry, and to me, it's mind-blowing how avant-garde these looks are. Beautiful jewelry, beautiful metal smithing, beautiful fabrics, Even leather work, for example. These are Dagobert Pérez designs that, to me, rival some great Frank Stellas. Graphic design, incredible graphic design by Coleman Mosier. Beautiful illustration, typography, even just little things like this that just blow my mind, the rhythm and the sensibility of the line and rhythms of these kinds of things. I mean, these are interiors that you could only dream of living in. So here we have, they're also associated with some actual artists like Gustav Klimt, Egon Schiele. This is Klimt. How radical is this? I mean, can you guys imagine if I had shown up in this outfit? I mean, personally, I wish I had the courage, but incredible. So these are some mosaics on the walls that Klimt did with some, furniture, tiling on the floor, carpets, lights, everything. Just incredibly amazing. And I don't think we have this now, and I'm not quite sure why, but we don't have this. Schiele, another one of my favorites as a teenager and still to today. Here's an office interior with a great inset Schiele, amazing chairs, shelving units, etc. So, my favorite designer from this Wiener Werkstatt is this guy, Dagobert Pérez. Amazing name, Dagobert, I think. It's almost ridiculous, but so here he is, quite shocking, I think. I've only added the pictures of the people if they were included in their books, so some people don't have pictures. It's up to them whether their picture got into this lecture, is what I'm saying. So Dagobert makes these, I think so. You have Hoffman and Mosier were, I think, a little bit stricter. They kind of conform to a more geometric version of design, more controlled. Pérez actually wanted to be a painter, and they entrusted him. I think he was like a co-director. They had stores actually. The Wiener Werkstatt. You could actually go in, and it was a little bit more than just the greatest grand bourgeoisie commissioning these things. But he was the co-director of a certain store or area. They had outposts in different cities and stuff. But he made these crazy psychedelic-y wallpapers. This is not a distorted photograph. The wallpaper actually fades in and out like that. He makes these incredible chairs. Here's some more interiors. And so Hoffman called him one of Austria's genius artists of the ornamental. And I think a lot of people think that the ornamental could be used in a pejorative, but I personally love the ornamental. It's a love-hate. You go with it, you have to go against it, but he was a genius in terms of ornament. So for me, when I look at this work, I think, what insane person drew this desk? And what insane person was tasked with actually making this drawing come to fruition? So just to give you an example of his hand, this is a letter he wrote. This is his actual handwriting, and this is how deep his sensibility was. This is how he envisioned this, was just from this drawing that you get that the skill of it is so offhanded, so light, so throwaway, as if you could say to him, "Oh, I would love a boudoir," and then bam, it shoots out with crazy abstracted pineapples at the top, some sort of weird putti, grapes, and all these other things. This was the very first work that I saw. This is actually my entryway into the Wiener Werkstatt. I saw this image on Tumblr, reverse image searched it, figured out it was a Pérez, researched Pérez, realized he was part of the Wiener Werkstatt, and then began the research. So this is kind of relating to what I was saying to you earlier, is that this is the research that goes into what I do, even if it doesn't show up directly. So here's another loony piece of his. I love the kind of trompe-l'oeil weight of these tassels. He made great metal works. All the sensibility is, to me, so perfect. It's joyful, even though I hate the word, it's whimsical. But at the same time, to me, when I look at it, I get such joy. And I think this is what's important, is that when you're drawing, you have all this distance between you and what's actually going to happen. It doesn't really matter, and you can really let yourself go. Even these are laces. just incredible to me. And then leather too, just incredible. So that's Pérez. So I wanted to take a slight detour just to say that some people actually think and draw, architects, but then they don't make things. And to me, I think this is also a real sweet spot in my fascination is fantasy architecture. And so I wanted to just briefly share this because I couldn't help myself. Hermann Finsterlin, he's German, starting a little bit before World War II, a complete fantasy architect, only drew, never actually built a single building. He was accidentally, supposedly commissioned by the Nazis to make something and weaseled his way out, and then his whole studio was blown up during World War II, and he spent the rest of the time after World War II till he died recreating drawings and recreating models of things that he built. So for my particular interest here is architecture made from fat rolls that represents carapaces, insects, pods, nature. And so what you're looking at here is his demented version of what a building could be. He never actually had to build it. And so we're talking, a long way before Frank Gehry or any of these people that were able to use computers and massive computing power to create engineering to build some of these things. I think these are absolutely fantastic examples, not only of drawing, but of thinking of structure and space. I think I did see in the back of this book, they have some very perverted stuff that he did too, which excited me, but I'm not sharing with you. Anyway, so he has some of these models that he made. There's one that MoMA owns. I think on their own, they're just absolutely gorgeous sculptures. And I really love architecture. I think it's such a wacky way to express yourself. I really wanted to share that with you. Okay, so the next part that I want to go to that relates you can see the first part relates to my work in sense of drawing and making. The second part is directly about drawing. And so one of the ways that I find most interesting to conjure creativity is through meditative processes. Some people could say doodling. Regardless of how you decide you want to describe it, I think what's interesting is that drawing has a very particular prodigal way that it relates to creativity. There is no risk. You can turn the page. At any second, you make a slight diversion in your thinking. You just do something different. And I wanted to share with you some of my favorite drafts people or drafts cultures and how they worked. So to start just with a little bit about me, I draw in these books. I draw in sketchbooks. I think sketchbooks are the kind of original iPhone. They're the way that you can people used to capture what they saw and what they experienced through sketchbooks. I do a type of drawing called automatic drawing where it's kind of like a Ouija board. Your hand is just on the paper and it's almost magnetized to move in ways that are particular to your own genetics, to your own experience, etc. I draw all the time kind of without the feeling of making something good or bad or whether it will be or won't be a sculpture. And recently I've gotten really inspired by Guy Davenport, but I wanted to share a couple of ideas in this quote. Visual annotation is close to writing. Okay, so to me, automatically, mind is blown. Cocteau said of drawings that they were writing untied and retied in a different way, also killing me. All drawing is an act of decisions, immediate revisions, split-second deliberations. That is intelligence at its most decisive creative potential. So we're not talking great works of art here. We're just talking something that somebody drew on the back of a napkin and on a receipt. This is the moment that your thinking becomes real without the economy, as he says later in this thing, of actually becoming a work of art. So rest before labor, said Blake. He might as well have said play before work. Amazing. For the sketchbook is both playground and testing place, the free exercise of pure intellect, whether in doodling, me, the draftsperson's daydreaming, or in copying nature with precision, not me. The creative mind is prodigal. I love his use of words here. I have to look up prodigal every time, but it's such a beautiful word. And its extravagance is at home in the sketchbook before its submission to the economy of a finished work of art. Very exciting to me. So these are just, I'm sharing with you some of my drawings. They're not necessarily made in a meditative state, but you'll see here, down here, this becomes this. And so for me, it's very important to stick to the actual problems of the drawing, because once you start to sculpt, you have all sorts of practical decisions that must be made, and they're not just what looks good. It's like, can this wood do this? Can I do this? Can this be done? And so what I try to do is stick with all those inconsistencies, because there are decisions that maybe you wouldn't make that would be difficult. We were just in Korea and we saw this beautiful sculpture and it had a little wart on it. And I love to make warts too. But a wart is really difficult to make in sculpture because you have to work on the whole thing but leave this one little piece. And so if you were impatient, you'd be like, no way, I'm not doing this. Like, is it worth it to have to spend an extra hour just to have this little wart? For me, yes. So these are some more of my doodles. I'm going to share more later. But I wanted to share this particular set just for anyone who's seen my exhibition next door. I'm going to share the complete set of original drawings that became the crack, starting from the left. Normally when I work on, if I have to, we start to create pet names here. So I'll come up with the beginning of how I think about things, hairy arm, butt tree, Jesus, excreting butts, excreting sun, judgment hand, crying eyeballs, Galileo, upward energy, a meditating figure, priest, protecting mouth, ticker tape fish, crushed head, sun cannon, embryo cave, another embryo, like menstruation, I don't know, something, and then protective wand. And so so then I took all those, and for the first time, I put them into Photoshop and figured out how I could get them all to go together in pieces, and then I'd make this piece. So that's how drawing works for me. So these are some other people who make drawings that I'll go through to kind of show you how other people do it. I'm a big fan of the Shakers. And I'm from Kentucky, and there's a Shaker village there. And so most people think of the Shakers as being design people. Some incredible designs, lots of symmetry, lots of harmony. As you know, that maybe they have separated the sexes, so you have female and male entrances, no procreation. Very, very strict. But the thing that I really relate to and love is they have this concept called work as prayer, which I really relate to, which is the kind of the productivity, the staying busy, the doing things brings you closer to God. If you're not into God, it just brings you closer to yourself. It makes you a more centered person. This is how I run my own practice. So these are the things that the Shakers are known for. Their great design, an economy of design, and brilliance of design, rhythm of design. But they also made these incredible drawings. Baskets. I mean, really parallel to Vienna Werkstatt here. We've got flatware, baskets, furniture, architecture. It's a whole universe of design and creativity. But the Shakers made these drawings called gift drawings, and they're often made by teenage girls. And I've seen this one in person. It's about this big. And so we're talking insane vision. And you can see that it's all these weird little squiggles. They're done in a kind of meditative state. They sometimes are diagrams. Sometimes they're languages that are, like not fake languages, but like kind of like gibberish that they've received. Everything they think that they are receiving directly from a greater being. So this is a drawing of a particular kind of twirling dance. These kinds of drawings, which you see, I mean, these are languages that they've kind of just received from their kind of conjuring and their kind of meditative states. This is stuff that I find really fascinating. How are we accessing this information that we don't even know that we know? An interesting side about the Shaker drawings is not displayed on the wall, put into drawers. They're not, and so you take them out to look at them when you need to look at them. This is one of my particular favorites, which describes a walk between buildings and the spiritual message that was received and when and where things were. So totally impossible for us to encode, but with just a tiny bit of information, we see the great brilliance of their connection to their subconscious, or in their words, their closeness to God. Anyway, Shaker gift drawings. There's a book out there, ABE Books, or wherever you get used books. Turkish kilams, also totally mind-blowing. My wife Bengu's Turkish, so we've been thinking about this for a really long time. Also made by women in off agricultural times during the fall and stuff like this. They're working on these. One thing you may not know about kilams, the technique and the design are fused. So it's not an art form where they're teaching the technique and then they're expressing themselves. These are particular techniques of knotting that lead to these designs. Often these designs have to do with fertility. They're mnemonic devices, fertility, seasonal changes, mythology, these kinds of things. I'm a huge fan of the kilam. Just looking at it also unlocks within me a kind of euphoric peacefulness, a kind of almost psychedelic experience of rhythm. Okay, Guo Fenji. She's a Chinese lady. She didn't start making drawings until she was 47. She's a practicer of Qigong, a meditative kind of process. These drawings, to me, completely mind-blowing. She uses a meditative state to envision the structure of organs. Like this is an ear, for example, and we're talking insane amount of lines, an insane rhythm, an insane quality of investigation. She also accessed the location of certain imperial tombs. She cured sickness through these drawings. It wasn't truly accepted by her peers until nearly the very end. This book, by the way, if you should choose to, the Drawing Center in New York produced this book. Excellent book, since there isn't much material on these. These often are scrolls, very, very, very large, incredible line quality. To me, something I'm looking for in my own work is this kind of meditative quality. I look for it in craft and in drawing, how the line can create this rhythm. Very sensitive. The sensitivity, to me, it hits me like haptically when I look at these drawings. I feel the interior of my body. Some of them are about specific people. You have to read the essay. I can't do it at this moment. But okay, another great draftsperson, Minnie Evans. She's from, well, she's dead now, North Carolina. Her story to me is absolutely mind-blowing. I'm getting ready to show you her first drawing ever. Never drawn before. She sits down, she accesses ancient peoples from before the flood. She's drawing proficiently, architecturally, universally, the crazy mandalas. What a great touch. This is her first drawing in 1935. This is her second drawing. So you've got she accessing like an incredible link to the subconscious, and in a Joseph Campbell kind of way or Jungian way, accessing all these crazy archetypes about people. She believed that she actually was accessing groups of people and their experience from, Old Testament times. She rarefies her process. It's marked always by some sort of symmetry and some sort of face-like quality. But I find them simultaneously terrifying and comforting. But I just really adore this work. They had one up in MoMA last year near Morris Hirschfield, who's also a great love of mine. Minnie Evans, there's a great book on her. There's some bad ones, but this one that I showed you is a great one. Anyway, just wonderful, wonderful work. Okay, this is a great, everyone knows this artist, of course, but I just recommending as this book as an excellent book of hers with some very, very straightforward and very Louise Bourgeois kind of quotes. And the thing that I get jazzed about with Bourgeois is this rhythm. And the rhythm is really important to me in art making. When you look at the works, you see the textures, but the textures have everything to do with rhythm. The rhythm has everything to do with breathing. And so I'm not going to read this whole quote, but the thing that's important to me here is that she's basically saying, this drawing is a call for meditation. And she's saying that she had insomnia and anxiety, and that this particular kind of drawing that she does, it allows her to get into this rhythm that allows her to slow her breath down. It allows her to get closer to her calmness. And so in this book, I really recommend it as an excellent book that talks all about how she comes up with all these things, her relationship to drawing, her relationship to her subconscious, and meditation, which is fascinating. Okay, of course, everybody knows Agnes Martin, but because of these paintings, but to me, one of her great things that she gave to us are these drawings. And so for me, these drawings have this excellent quality. The pen touches the paper, it makes a line. Pen touches the paper, it makes this line. Pen touches the paper, it makes this line. And so you get that from the paintings, but I think with the drawings, the imperfection of it and the way in which it touches the paper and the way in which the ink goes out onto the paper and the way in which there are some mistakes and the way in which maybe they approach something a little bit more sensitive and vulnerable than the paintings. If I was to own an Agnes Martin, I would definitely want one of these drawings. I think these drawings are absolutely fantastic. I've never seen them in reality, though. And I'm recommending this great book of her writings as well. Nicholas Pope. Okay, so this guy I found super, super interesting. There he is with his wife. He's cute. So he's a kind of Australian, or was a kind of Australian Richard Serra, one of these, or Anthony Caro. He's this kind of macho, sculptor-y guy, a very early Nasherian kind of sculptor guy. And he goes to Tanzania, and he got this encephalitic virus. And it really deteriorated him, and then he eventually got this, I think he has maybe Parkinson's as well. And he had to completely abandon this kind of macho way of touching material. And at his doctor's request, he began his rehabilitation by drawing rhythmically. And he was a big fan of doo-wop and early rock and roll, and so he drew these things in order to get his motor skills back. And they have this great quality that I love that is not only the series of drawings they're titled things like sad drawings, or like they have all these ways in which in order to get his health back, he had to go through this artistic process. And I think that's something a lot of artists do, is like, how can I use my art to fix myself? It's a self-therapeutic process of, for me, for example, it's craft, like going to the studio every day and spending hours and hours and hours removing wood, like makes me feel okay. It makes me feel like I can be a good husband, or I can be a good contribution to society. And so these drawings kind of, to me, are the story of someone rehabilitating themselves. And not only that, but I feel like their relationship to nature, to singular cellular organisms, to algae, to these kinds of things is also very palpable. And that he's not only is he rebuilding himself, but he's kind of like going back through nature, where nature evolves to rebuild itself. And I just love these drawings. I love their relationship to art and early modernism, and also like hearkening back to the Louise Bourgeois drawings. Like, how do I use this piece of paper to center myself and to make myself realize that I'm in the nowness moment? And of course, he does gain back some motor skills, and he becomes a little bit more proficient in his drawings, which is also mind-blowing. I love these drawings. I love the language of what they're doing. So these are mine. So I wanted to share a little bit here, my own relationship to meditative drawing. And so I am a meditation practitioner. Have been practicing for about 10 years. I came to meditation through being extremely frustrated by losing a backgammon match to my wife's father. And I didn't want to misbehave, so I went into the back room and I began meditating. And when I came back to the States, I said, I'm going to set out and do this meditation. And so all my life as an artist, I always said, give me the far out imagery. You know what I mean? Like give it to me. And so I've done, mushrooms, I've done ayahuasca, I've done other things in order to unlock this imagery that I imagined was outside of me. And through meditation one day, I started having this vision. And it was so mind-blowing because, of course, the imagery is inside you already. Of course, you don't need to go outside of yourself to have a relationship with your own imagery. And so I keep a logbook of my meditation, and so I purely made this drawing, not this drawing, but a drawing like this in the little book, just to record what I was doing. And so can you see the little cursor there on the drawing? Okay, so the breathing goes in this way, like that. And then once it reaches the top, the breathing goes out. And it's simple. And so no one taught me this. It just kind of came to me. And it was really mind-blowing because I had been waiting to create some imagery. And I wasn't using meditation to come up with imagery. It was a side effect. And so I drew this. And then I realized, well, you know what the hell? I'm going to do this. I'm going to meditate, hop on the bike, go to the studio. And instead of getting dusty immediately, I'm going to make a drawing every day. And so I started making these drawings. And I started to get really obsessed with the feeling of their gouache. They're about this big. And part of the reason why I'm wearing glasses, actually, is because they got so small, I started to wear these magnifiers, and it totally ruined my eyes. Anyway, so I got really obsessed with these, and I let the form change a little bit as it changed in my meditations as well. But again, these are drawings that deal with rhythm. They deal with the rhythm of breathing. They deal with the rhythm of the moon cycle. They deal with the night and day. Walking. Everything is rhythmic, actually. And so as an artist, I think a lot of artists tap into this rhythm. It's comforting. And so for me, it's also comforting to make a grid and to put dots on the grid, or to do lots of tiny dots, or to do lots of tiny lines. When you go and look at the sculptures, it's the same process. It's just a different tool. The tool is spinning like a dentist tool. It's touching the wood over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. And so I find that comforting. My dad, who makes sculptures, he says, I don't know how you have the patience. It's not a talent. It's just what makes me feel good, So anyway, so these are some of my own. I don't want to cheat you and not talk about my work, but this is what I do that relates to Nicholas Pope, that relates to Minnie Evans, that relates to Louis Bourgeois, etc. Anyway, okay, so the next little section here, you're going to have to work with me on this because it's a little bit of a harebrained idea. Okay, so I talk about this stupid book every time I give a lecture. I can't tell you how much this book has impacted my life. This book, The Spiritual and Abstract Painting, was a show that was at LACMA, organized by Maurice Talkman. It includes the work of, back in the 80s it was made. It had Hilma af Klint, it had Marsden Hartley, it had Kandinsky, it had Arp, it had all these great masters, even Agnes Martin. It had all these people. And the book itself has essays by the 80s best critics and amazing, incredible essays. And I learned about Sarah Charshun in it, you may not know the work, but I love that work. And I've gotten so much from this book. But there's an essay in it by Donald Cuspit. And the essay, I'm going to totally, this is such a dilettante way to put it, but I am not an academic. But what I read in this essay was this. The original abstractionists, like Kandinsky, these kinds of people, for them, abstraction was actually spiritual. There wasn't a shitload of money to be made in art, and that really the paint moving on the canvas was their way of working out their relationship to the world and to the universe, and it was their way of creating their own spirituality. So what Cuspit says is that as time goes forward, art world becomes more material, materials become more material, and that he posits that this has left artists that want to deal with spirituality to work with silence. So think James Turrell. basically, or any of your other minimalists. He did some great writing on minimalists. He helps us understand that minimalism is not just this antiseptic kind of thing, that it is spirituality, and that it's the spirituality of the unmade world or the unworld of all these things. And so when I read this thing, I started thinking, okay, well, abstraction also has a tendency to work its way into figuration. And when it works its way into figuration, does that mean that it gets louder? And so I kind of came up with this concept, which is stupid, but it's fun. So we'll just walk with me here. So I basically am going to present to you a fade of 8 artists from your most quiet and minimal and most purely abstract to your most euphoric and transcendental and figurative artists. And so I'm going to try to bridge this gap from the most quiet to the most loud. So we'll start with what I call spiritual minimalism. Robert Grosvenor, also kind of a macho, guy making big works out of big material. But to me, one of the tendencies that I've found in spiritual minimalism is works that imply the tomb. They imply an unworld. So what you're looking at here is not necessarily a bunch of railroad ties. It's this material that's making the world disappear. It's a place that material goes to die. And his transformation of the most elementary materials into something sublime is, to me, something that I'm not capable of, that I'm very envious of. So this is a kind of pipe in which he's just barely cinched the edges. This is just one pure timber, but inside that timber, there's so much potentiality for death, for life, for energy, for all these different things. Here's a different view of that other piece. I also once heard a rumor. He did have a studio on the waterfront in Williamsburg, and I heard a rumor from an older artist that he once actually tapped into the gas line to steal his own natural gas. Don't know if that's true, but that's what I heard. So I also heard from Donald Cuspet here that he had took these railroad ties and he tied them up to a truck and just dragged them around in a parking lot in order to get this kind of shape here. But I find all these to be tomb-like. I find them to relate to Egypt. I find them also to relate to a kind of primordial home, or to all these kind of like ancient and classical ideals. I love the way that he's transforming just your most banal materials, a cinder block, a tarp, some corrugated steel, and you've got this incredible moving temple to the unmade, or to the unformed, or to the unexisting. And then as the work progresses towards where he is now, as he gets maybe slightly more representational, I see them as alien landing pads. I see them as, waiting places. I love this one has this crazy piece of bacon. He also made all these great minimalist sculptures that I'll share that don't necessarily, minimal in terms of like sci-fi here, that I think are amazing, that I'm not sure, maybe they're observatories. I still would claim that they're tombs. Robert Grosvenor. Okay, Johannes Schreiter. Nobody's going to know this guy, I think. If there is, somebody raise or say so. Nobody knows this, right? Okay. So when I was a teenager, I worked for an architect making, this is him, a German guy. So when I was a teenager, I worked for a stained glass artist, and it was my job to make the models. And he would make the little mock-ups, and we would plug them into the models. And so I learned about Johannes Schreiter when I worked for this guy. And he does incredible, incredible stained glass windows that are all around Germany. Really, really beautiful, again, with the touch. I'll show you a drawing of his that could be almost an Agnes Martin. Just an incredible touch. I really related to this work as a teenager. And as an adult, I remembered it, and I wanted to go back and research it. So I did, and I got these books that I'm sharing with you. So this is a drawing of his that I adore. But what I really wanted to share with you was these flame collages that he made, where he used flames and torn paper to make these works that I again think of as kind of funeral pyres, the site of some sort of stove or oven or like energy producing place. I feel the heaviness of these, like they feel so heavy, not depressed, but they feel they're creation myths, but they're also the declining myths, they're the decline of civilization, that there's something rotten, something burning. But I really, really love these works. I always have loved these works, and I think they're fascinating. All made with burning and ripping. Okay, as we're working this way, again, keep in mind we're getting a tiny bit, at every step we're getting a tiny bit more representational. So Vince Vecteau, amazing artist. So it's very hard to talk about these works. This is very early work, but this is maybe what he's more known for, is making these works in paper mache. And I see these works as tombs or sarcophagus. I'm thinking what happens to Chernobyl when they put the sarcophagus over it. I think of these as lids for some sort of great mechanical ballet. I think of them as, maybe not this one, but I think of them as, when they use the sonars in South America to look for hidden cities. I feel like that his subconscious has a great sonar-like quality that's defining the shape of something that he won't reveal. It's an exoskeleton that's covering up some sort of something that we don't know about, whether it's a great machine or a great movement of a body or something else. And I think of all the sculptures I've ever seen in my life, a Vecteau can never be digested from one view. And so in his books, he has these great imagery where he shows, this is the same sculpture. It's like from each angle, it's something completely different. I think it relates to Finsterlin a little bit. It's architecture. But for me, I feel like it's the covering of some mysterious activity that we'll never be able to understand. And so for me, it's one of the greatest works of art because you're standing looking at it and you just cannot know what it is. And for me, I find that so comforting. It's not a puzzle for us to decode. It's an object. Ruth Duckworth, another modernist sculptor, working primarily in ceramics. We've got some great pictures of her. There's this one coming up. So depressed looking almost, right? Or contemplative, but you get this feeling in the studio sometimes, like, what the fuck am I doing? Anyway, so she works in a kind of area that some people have called cycladic. I feel like its great relationship is to the bone. And so in my crooked way of thinking here, as we start to creep into an area of biomorphic, of course we start with bone, not with flesh, that we start with something that's dead. We start with something that's stony, that's not stony, but made of stone. And she's working, of course, with the body, but not really. I'm not really quite sure. Again, major tomb vibes, major interior vibes. Early mitosis vibes, twinning. And my favorite work of hers is coming up soon. It really gets me going. I love when, this isn't it, but you see this little nubbin. I love these nubbins, oh, well, whatever. Let's see. Oh no, what have I done? Hold on. Oh no. Okay, whew. Anyway, she gets into this area, which, okay, I love this too. It's very perverted and vagina dentata. But this is the work of hers that gets me going the most, where it feels like a joint. You feel the bone on bone. It's arthritic. It has this great quality, but it's also some sort of bird of paradise. I don't know, but I love this work. This is my favorite work of hers. Okay. So the last artist, I think, in this section of spiritual minimalism is actually really heading towards this euphoric transcendence, which is our next area. So I'm very proud of this collection of books here. These are all this artist, Walter Pichler. He's Austrian, very, to me, Austrian-looking guy. He looks like he could be like a shop teacher or something. Anyway, he was most at comfort with people who had vocations, plumbers, engineers. He wasn't really an artist guy. He did work at the school in Vienna, but he's kind of known initially as an another fantasy architecture guy. He kind of with like Friedrich Kiesler or somebody like that. He made all these things that kind of were supposed to reference architecture, but also modernist art. So the thing that, it's very difficult to explain what he did, but the thing that's amazing about him is he worked very slowly. He didn't make very many works of art. And then when he made a work of art, he then built a building to house that work of art, which I think to me is just mind-blowing. So this is an aerial view of his compound. So each little house there houses a particular work. And so he designed all these, and I love the aesthetic of these. And then he made, I'm gonna go through his process, but I wanted to share, like on the property are also these very Brancusi-like birds, or women as he called them sometimes, that were scattered around the compound. Really beautiful things. So, damn it, sorry. Anyway, so this will help you understand what he does. This is a project he made for the Biennale in Venice in '82. Okay, starts with a drawing. This drawing is a torso, but the torso is growing. So he uses these trees to make the beginning of this torso. Then he covers the torso in hay. He then puts clay over the hay, lets the clay dry out a little bit, forms a bronze like chest plate, and then this weird, helmet. And then you see he's also placed it into this funky architecture. You see at the bottom there, it fits into this thing. Once he's done making it, they have this mystical performance where they carry it from the workshop into the building that he's designed for it. Now, mind you, this isn't like a place that's like, it's not a museum. It's like he's really just doing it for himself. I don't know, it's in the countryside of Austria. So here's the building, and this is the piece that as it gets installed in the thing, in the architecture. He's got pedestals that go directly into the earth, you see there, where there are mounds of earth. He's got these helmets. Of course, it relates to World War II and some other things. It definitely relates to the body and trauma, but he really seems most at peace again in this making. And so here's another one. He conceives of this weird being, this kind of, I don't know, for me, I think of it as like a Buddhist monk for some reason. Again, same weird process, works with soil from the land, uses that soil to cast metal. The metal gets attached to this body, and then he's making clothing for the body, and then he puts the body in the rafters of this building that he's created. When I first saw this work, I was so drawn to it, but I just thought, what the hell is this? Like, what is this guy doing? This one is a funeral stele, but he makes these steles, and then he designs these compounds for them. And even his studio has all these like weird things, like this is a table saw that he uses, but he also fabricated this weird thing that goes over top of the blade when he's not using it. Or my favorite is this. In the studio, he decides to create a pan that gathers the rainwater so that when it rains and he's in the studio, the water can run through the studio. Just a total maniac. Okay. So now we're going to go into euphoric transcendence. So this is work that burns. This is work that has multiple dissonant harmonies. This is a work that tends towards maximalism. This is work that tends towards the figurative. This is work that has the joy of chaos and that eventually, I think, burns itself up. It's very extreme. First artist, someone who I dearly love, Bruno Gironcoli. I learned of Bruno Gironcoli through Vince Vecteau, and I learned about Walter Pichler through researching the footnotes in this Bruno Gironcoli book. So this is kind of, I want you to understand, this is why I give these lectures. This is why I'm trying to weave all these things. I'm trying to just describe the typical research process. So here's Gironcoli, or here's Gironcoli, or here. He has tons of pictures in his book, and they're all great. Or this one. This is such a gorgeous photograph. What a character. So Gironcoli's works were so big and mostly made from crazy bronze and stuff that a lot of them never left Vienna. And he taught at the art school there. And eventually, when he passed away, they just built a museum around these works. And I'm dying to go to Vienna to see it. So He begins in this minimal way, maybe even part of the spiritual minimalists, and he progresses towards more and more extravagance, and they get bigger and bigger and more convoluted until you've got a room-sized sculpture. So the thing that I find most interesting about Gironcoli is, what the fuck are we looking at? Like, what is this stuff? Like, you're looking at it and you're saying to yourself, this is a gorgeous image. This is the workshop. Oh, sorry, I got ahead of myself. Anyway, again, he works very minimally for a while until he gets great. Anyway, lots of spaceships, lots of isolating here, figuring out the language. Also a great draftsperson, has a lot of sexual torture, which I think is interesting. And he works his way up to these complicated installations, and then eventually the complication that he's looking for in display, which is something that I also enjoy. How can we maximize the display? How can we promote the connection between the sculptures? Eventually, those condense into the sculptures. So let me get there. Okay, so you're looking at these sculptures, and I think his brilliance is like, he actually takes really banal stuff and it's like subliminal. So it's like, this is like grapes and croissants. Like, it's not really like that crazy, or like, I'm always seeing corkscrews or like utensils, or like all these things, chickens, babies, like flames, like, but the level of visual sophistication here, I feel like, is kind of unrivaled in sculpture. The way that everything is blending together, all the different layers. You're looking at it and you're thinking, like, is it a machine? Is it a power station? Does it create heat? Is it a vehicle? Like, how is it working? Is it Rube Goldbergian? Like, these are all the things that come to my mind. And then the babies come in. And I don't know anyone who can get away with this. Like, are they babies? Are they aliens? They're everywhere. And to me, it's just fascinating. Like, maybe Joseph Cornell gets away with it too. I don't know, but it's like, sometimes they're alien. They look like a combination of a toucan and has a tail. I don't know. But the babies, I mostly can admire this work for being able to do that. Like this, roasted chickens and babies, or aliens that have been done surgery on. Like, there's so much trauma here. This is something that I look for in my work as well, is like, how can I present to you like pure joy, but also pure agony at the same time, and try to like tune into either tricking you to look for the agony or tricking you to look for the joy, depending on your own hang-ups. I included so many images here of his work because I wanted to share it with you, but see the corkscrews, like, are they pigtails, corkscrews? Like, so much here I think is just actually taken from real life, but he's made it feel so alien, which is a gift a lot of artists have. Anyway, I guess you get the point. And I did once see one in person. They had it in Brooklyn. So this is not from a book. This is actually a picture at Clearing in Brooklyn. They had a show of his, and I was super psyched to see it. Okay, so this guy, another freak, another Vienna freak, actually, Ernst Fuchs. Okay, so this guy, born with an Orthodox Jewish father who had to flee Austria, went to Shanghai, left him with his mother. Mother converts him to Christianity to protect him from World War II. But he remains a kind of Old Testament guy. He really is an outsider for most of his contemporaries that are doing lots of abstraction and a lot of modernism. We're talking like 50s, 60s here. I think of him as the proto H.R. Giger, but just extremely maximal, investigating sex, death, and the kind of the Old Testament. And so we're just like, really, the detail level is just insane. We're talking, this is what I'm talking about, like, as it goes from abstraction to representational, you get this like burning loudness. It's all of a sudden the art is loud. It's like, it's combining all these things, and it's dissonance, and the body brings in all this noise. And he comes up with these great crystalline animal textures, and so it's a fever dream of the Old Testament meets some sort of sci-fi orgy. I don't even know. I don't even know. I mean, like this detail here, I love this detail. It's very great. And then he goes into this like area, like I was saying, like the harmonies on top of harmonies on top of harmonies, that where you can't really understand what you're looking at, but he's definitely tapping in again to some sort of Jungian archetypalness, and then goes into the 70s into some kind of poster art stuff, which I really love sci-fi artists, so I had no shame there. But always constantly weird, surreal, but pushing it so far that we can't even really understand how we're looking at what we're looking, and not in a cubist way, in a fever dream psychedelic way. A real outlier. And then to me, although you'll think maybe this is a weird shift, but the pinnacle of this kind of euphoric transcendence is this guy, Peter Buggenhout. And these works are actually made, like, I'm thinking, like, as I went from, like, Gironcoli through these other people, like, my thought was, like, and even in the Old Testament or, like, in religious mythology, like, you go from, like, purity to this taintedness to apocalypse. And so it's like, maybe that's the human narrative. And so when you bring the body into abstraction, like, this is what you get. And so I feel like Buggenhout is this like this is like the end point of this game, is that these are works, I love this, he collects people's vacuum cleaner bags. And so like these are works that are not only architectural detritus and thrown away parts of our consumption, but they're covered in our dead skin cells and lint. And to me, he takes like discarded parts of animals, like stomachs, and like these are some of these are sewn together bladders from cows, like stomachs and stuff like this. And I think like this is end of days stuff. It's like it's old wires. It's parts of cars, it's parts of interior architecture, and then he just pours this like slurry of waste, but not excrement, like skin cell waste. And I love this work. Like, it's so opposite of mine, but it's like it's something that I'm also interested in, is like how do we show the apocalypse? How do we show like the intensity of everything that's happening in the world from a dark point of view, not from an uplifting point of view. And I think Buggenhout is the end point of this thing. Okay, so I'm gonna now just talk about my work. I'm gonna try to sew in a little bit from these other parts. It won't take that long. Sorry if I'm going too long here. All right, so this part is about me and my goofy shit that I do in the studio. So I work, as I said, by myself. I work in a little room like this, out of basswood. You can see over here, these are my tools right here. Mostly everything I do comes from these little tools. Oh no. I carve basswood. Like I said, I start with drawing. I start with automatic drawing. I go from automatic drawing to cutting apart pieces of wood. I use a bandsaw to cut apart a single piece of wood. So the sculpture I'm going to go through here was originally one piece of wood that I added a little bit to and took away from. So you can see here, this piece of wood on the side there was actually part of it. I cut it off and then I sculpt it. And then you'll see those flat things, I sculpt those too. And then you can see sometimes I add wood to create, depth, and then I carve that. And then I texturize, so you can see like different parts here we'll go through. Let's see, texturization. Like you can see in the center there, it's rough, and then it becomes smooth, and then I texturize the stuff. So I sculpted that big, weird C-shaped thing and got it pretty smooth, and then I took the little tool and just for hours and hours and hours. And then I get this sculpture, and then sign the bottom. And then Bangu and I, my wife Bangu, we work on color together. So at home, usually on Sundays, I'm a 6-day-a-week guy. I like to work all the time. It's what makes me feel great. So on Sundays, even though it's my day off, I usually try to rope Bangu into doing color so that I can just do something work related. And so we have all these color swatches. We go through the color swatches. We use body language and other psychic qualities and of our 26 years together to kind of cobble together great color combinations. So this, for example, this was how we did the color for the work in the other room. So we knew we wanted the color for the crack to be a monochrome, so we based it all on red. So we took all of our colors that had red in them, and Bengu made this great fade from blue reds all the way into purple reds, into red reds, and then into pinks, and then back over to kind of black cherries at the end. And then we took all those colors and we made a home note for each piece. So there are 18 parts of the crack. And so we did a color for each one of those, and then we did a palette for each of those 18 parts. So, and then I always make a little drawing that labels it, so I know what to do later. And then you get the final piece. So for me, I also would like to be a spiritual minimalist. It's just not in my DNA. I try to make some minimal works. I find making minimal works to be the most radical part of my practice because it takes the most restraint for me to not add more to it. I'm actually a maximalist. I enjoy most to make contrived connections, as you can see from experiencing this lecture. But I do enjoy to try to do something minimal. And at heart, I'm a maximalist, and so I like to combine, I like to layer, I like for works to burn, and I mostly get obsessed with all the little details of the works. How can I create little pimples, little moles, little connections, little areas in which you can't see this on the back of the sculpture? I'm also in it often. For example, like these are earplug holders. Like I felt like these really relate to the Vienna Werkstatt. Like it's like, there is a part of me that could be at home with a client that wanted me to create an insane interior for them. Like I would be happy to do that too. I have ultimate freedom in the studio and that would be hard to give up, but I do like to make practical objects too. I am a person who works not only with abstraction, but with the body. And coming with the body is, as I've said before in my lectures, like the body is funny, the body is embarrassing, the body is sexual, the body is sad. It is all these things. And so I work with those kinds of qualities as well. And I do love architecture. And so there is a lot of architectural and kind of engineering qualities that I bring to the work in my research with science and all sorts of other things. So I have all these qualities in my work that I've tried to share with you through my experience of looking at other people's work. Sorry. So these are, I wanted to say, like this is also kind of my maximalist intentions, that I rarefied for our show here, but initially this was part of my concept for my show at the Nasher was to present three versions of this sculpture that graduated in pedestal height that mimicked the stairs coming into the Nasher. But then once the pandemic hit and I had to like redefine what I wanted to do. But I do have this kind of euphoric, I would say more of a euphoric transcendence person than a spiritual minimalist. And so before I made this work for the Nasher, this is a kind of a trope of mine, which is instead of combining all the works like I've done with this work, I put them into a procession. It's a kind of a thing that I like to do. And after working in processions, I kind of arrived at this way of working that I expanded on in a show last year, and then ultimately culminated in the show here for the Nasher, which is a way in which I take drawings or single works and I combine those to kind of create this maximalist statement. So anyway, that'll be the end of my lecture, and I would love to take questions if anyone has them about my work or anything else. Questions? Thoughts? I think she's got a mic. Yeah.
I have the mic. Hi, I loved your talk.
Oh, thank you. I wasn't sure, so thanks for saying that. That was the first thing I was thinking.
Yeah, no, it was visually stunning, a lot to think on.
Okay, cool.
For me personally, I was interested in, so you interface with a lot of 2D material for your research, but you are a 3D artist.
Yeah.
So for me, that was interesting. I wanted to hear more about why you are driven to go from a drawing to a 3D sculpture.
Okay.
And also why, even in your approach to the material, you talk about it through an artist and design standpoint. Even material that's generally associated with craft, like shaker, baskets, kiln rugs. So where do you see yourself? I know you might be tired of talking about like art versus craft, but where do you see yourself in that sort of dichotomy? And you seem to situate yourself a lot on the side of the artist, but you're working in a material that is generally associated with craft.
Okay, so can I start?
Yeah, of course.
All right, because I was worried you were going to add more to that.
No, it's basically just like.
Okay, I'm ready. Here we go. Okay, so the thing is I originally started with photography, and from photography I went to school then for painting, and I got really disappointed with the discourse around painting, so I began making sculpture. And so I really, at heart, I think I am interested mostly in painting. I think that a lot of my research has to do with painting. But the thing is that I'm not the most gifted drafts person, and it took me years and years and years to trust my draftsmanship. When I was in college, I had to take the life drawing, and I couldn't do it the way that everybody else was doing it, and I finally gave up and said, whatever, this is the way that I do it, and like move aside, And so I did that, and I think the great thing about sculpting is that, or any practice, is like the more you work at it, the more you you get your chops, and you become more mannered, and eventually you can almost do whatever you want in that material. But the great thing about translating a drawing to a sculpture is that a drawing, since it's in elevation, like it only shows one side of what you're doing. So like the other side, like you have pure freedom to do anything you want in sculpture. And so for me, there's nothing really more titillating than like having the tool and just like, and like going, like creating this thing and thinking like, did I just make a mistake? Or like, how am I gonna do this? And it's a little bit like drumming, like it's a mind-body melding, and you're sculpting something that you don't even know. It's the same as drawing, I guess. Like you can do that with sculpting. You can make something you don't even know where you're going or how it actually looks until you start sculpting it. And so for me, I think like I found that because I tend to be a controlled person, that having the drawing done under circumstances that I'm not worried about helps me, because I don't worry about whether it's going to be good or bad or whatever. I'm just drawing, and I draw all the time. I never wait for inspiration. I don't wait for opportunities. I just like diarrhea, just like, and so I do that. And then what helps me then is like when I decide, I vibe on whatever it is I've drawn, choose a couple things, start making those. I'm not worried. I've already decided I'm making this. It doesn't matter now whether it's good or bad. I've committed to making it, so I don't worry again. And then when I'm sculpting, the same thing happens, is like I'm just in the process of making that object, so I don't really worry about whether it's gonna work out or not. And so I think what I gain from the 2D, 3D thing is like I have a plan, so I can focus on sculpting. Or like with drawing, it's like I have the desire or the libido to be creative, so I like be creative. The craft thing, okay, so I went to Yale in the late 90s, and like you couldn't touch craft with the 10-foot pole. Like it was all about other stuff. And it took me a really long time to learn that what I like is working. And when I looked even in my general region, like you've got like all these Appalachian whittlers and other people that worked with wood. I mean, they're not my people necessarily. I grew up in Louisville. I'm not like out there in the mountains, but it's like, that was the craft that I saw growing up. You know what I mean? And it was like, and to me, like, that relationship to work is also something that's maybe like Midwestern, It's like, well, are we good people? Yeah, we work hard or whatever, And so it was like, that's I think that's more wholesome to lean on than like, did my piece sell, or did I get this show, or did I get this review, or whatever. It's like, did I give this like everything I have? And like, I think the working is like it's one palpable thing that I'm okay with. I don't always like say that just because I worked hard on it, it's good, or I'm fine, or I'm an okay person, or whatever. But I'm okay with that as a hang up or a vice. Like, do I like working a lot? Yeah. Is it maybe unhealthy? Yeah, but it's fine with me because of that. And to me, the craft discourse it's a nothing burger for me. I mean, I'm not a high or low art person. I like bad TV. I love comic books. I don't make a differentiation between it. I will say that James Joyce says, like, his concept of good and bad art was like bad art was like pornography, advertising, works that move you. They make you disgusted or they make you turned on. And great works of art were works that made you like vibrate in a place of stasis where you're like, is it good, is it bad, is it great, is it blah, 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 and you're just like, you can't tell. And those are great works of art. And I kind of agree with that, but I like pornography and I like cartoons and I like, I like commercials and sign painting, and I like David Hammons is always saying, like, on the way to the exhibition, I saw something better than what I saw. Like, I'm with that too. So it's like the craft part. I mean, maybe there's some great writing that can be done there, but for me, I don't really make a differentiation. I love craft, so it's not. I have no embarrassment. I will never apologize for that. Next question.
I've been blown away by this lecture.
Thanks.
This is unbelievable.
Okay.
I want to ask you why the gentleman of the giant sculpture, I think he's German. I'd never heard of.
Gironcoli, Bruno Gironcoli, yeah.
How come where is he? Where is he?
I mean, I think because he was he worked at the art school there. He was like a kind of a local guy, and those sculptures were too big. Like, they can't. I mean, how are you gonna transport one of those to Venice or bring it to America, or like, I mean, it's like it was just an impossibility. And I think, I mean, unfortunately, like, we're limited by the market and by what's possible and by money and all this stuff. I mean, for me, it's one of the reasons why I wanted to keep my practice footprint so small, so that when the collectors dry up or whatever, it's like I just have my work in the studio, and it's like that's why I don't want to run a business. I don't want to have a bunch of. I'm not saying people that run businesses are bad. That's not what I mean. But I'm just saying, for me, it's like I don't want to run a business. I'm an artist. I want to have my freedom. I want to try as hard as I can to protect myself from financial, like when there's bad times. But it's like that's that, and I think that's the reason why Gironcoli didn't, take off. Maybe is because. It was too difficult. But I tell you what, an artist, I mean, so many artists that I know, you mentioned Gironcoli, and I think a lot of people love this work. It has architecture, design, it has humor, it has surrealism, it's greatly fabricated, and I think I'm not an expert on it. In a short lecture like this, like, I can't really go into the content of each artist's work, but I think there's some serious trauma there, and I think that's also what makes it interesting, is that it's vulnerable.
Thank you so much.
Next question.
Probably do it without that.
Okay, yeah, hit me up.
I'm thinking about the work that's here.
Yeah.
And it's panoramic form, and the way I'm curious if you think of it that way, and the way that you've encouraged or forced me as a viewer to walk along and engage with it, and the way it unfolds as I move along. Do you see it that way?
Yeah, well, let me tell you, when I began working on this piece, or at least started to conceive what it was going to be, one of the first things I did was I started to research horizontality in art. And so that led me and Bengu to look at a lot of Japanese screens and scrolls, and even some Renaissance compositions, the Last Supper, or these kinds of extreme horizontality. It's actually more of a rarity in Western art than you would think. It's a difficult composition to work with. But for me, the other thing is that I'm really interested in language and in grammar and writing in general. And I think that in my earlier works, before I went more into abstraction, narrative was like a really important part of my work. And so I think I re-investigated some of these concepts, and I found that like, in a way, like you can also do this vertically, but it becomes a much more difficult like physical feat to keep something vertical. And that the horizontality also, I feel like it's more peaceful, and it's more grounded. And works that go vertical, like we tend to think of as totemic, and there's a whole different thing that goes with that. And so I did a lot of research into horizontality, and I find it really interesting. But mostly I'd say Japanese screens and like Chinese scrolls and stuff like that. I looked a lot at the composition of those and how the story is told, but mostly composition. That was how we arrived at the composition of the piece, that it would have large outside parts and bulge up a little bit in the middle. I noticed in a lot of Edo period screens that it was like there was an activity on the sides, but maybe not so much in the middle. Anyway, next question, if there is one.
Thank you. I enjoyed the lecture very much too. It was great.
Thank you.
And my question is very much related to the previous question. So I'll just try to get to the nub of it, which has to do with the horizontal white plinth. And I see the artwork as anchored to that.
Yeah.
And I wonder what you think about that, if you think of alternatives, if you don't think about that issue at all.
Yeah, I'll tell you. To me, as I've shared here today, like a little bit, like I'm a big architecture person, and so I think like the function of the pedestal has always been, in my mind, to bring a tiny bit of logic to an otherwise illogical endeavor. And so like even if you see a body standing on a like, I'm talking like a classical sculpture, you see a body, but it needs a plinth so that we understand that it's not on reality, It's like we need to know that we're not, it's a contract, It's like, and so for me, I feel like in the early times of my work, like in the early 2000s, I showed everything on the floor. And there was something about it to me that was maybe a little bit like teenagery. Like I was kind of, and I was younger too, and I thought, oh, just throw this shit on the floor, and just like, let's leave it there. Like that's, we're not elevating, like just leave it. And what's funny is the older I get, the pedestal heights just get creeping up. And I think a lot of times it's because when things are on the floor, if they're not very tall, your viewpoint of them is foreshortened, and that's really just not the way to look at things unless you're trying to play tricks on a viewer. So I just have kind of given into the traditional quality of the pedestal. Once Casey, my dealer in New York, had me remake or reconceive a pedestal for an art fair because it was a big pedestal, and he didn't want it to. It does create mass in the space, and I can see how that's unattractive. So we made a version that was like more made from more designy, so that you could see through it. I don't know. For me, I've never been interested in kind of institutional critique. I don't critique what other people have done. I want to stay more within my own logic, and so I feel like whenever I see pedestals that are like that differentiate themselves somehow, like is it like an I-beam with like something on it? Like okay, it's fine, but it's like I feel like it's kind of unnecessary. I'd rather just focus on the sculpture, and so I feel like we've all kind of accepted that the white pedestal is like your standard thing, and so I want to just go with that. Does that help? Okay. Anybody else? Oh, back there in the back.
Sorry. You had talked about meditation and how that's part of your process. I was just curious if there are like specific like Buddhist monks whose readings you've really related with and have like influenced you, or if there are like schools of meditation, and if there's anything else that you can share about how.
Yeah, hold on. I always forget this lady's name. She is very famous. What is her name? She did like I can't remember her name. She made this book about fear. She's a famous Buddhist nun. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Hi. Yeah, so what's her name? Pema Chodron? Yeah. But when I first started meditating, one of the things the advice that I got from Bengu was like, just make it your own and hold on to what works for you and let go of what doesn't work. And so I didn't really study with anyone. I do a version of like a zazen. So I do a lot of things. I mean, I do flute playing, stretching, then flute playing. I do like a breath of fire, like a breathing like this. And then I do like a body awareness, and then I do a zazen. Sometimes I throw in like a tonglen, like a compassionate kind of exercise. But that's mainly my thing, mostly zazen. Does that answer your question? Yes. Okay. Yeah?
Yeah, I was just wondering how you see your work in relative to all this media that's going on today.
What do you mean by media?
Computer technology, social media.
Oh. Well, I mean, I'm addicted to the internet, for sure. And I don't particularly care for social media, although I use it. I think in the beginning it was interesting for me because, like an Instagram, because you could see what other artists were like goofing off with or reading or whatever. But in particular, in relationship to technology, I mean, I don't feel that it's anti-technology. I mean, I'm very interested in like a kind of formal cybernetic visual system, meaning like some things look natural, some things feel machine-like or feel like, I'm interested in this interface. And I think in the end, we created technology. And so technology is part of nature. I don't see it actually as being separate of nature. I mean, it evolves, like, language is a technology, and it develops, And so I don't feel, I mean, I would say if we were just like having a drink, I'd say like, oh yeah, F social media and this kind of stuff. But media, it's such a general term. I have a hard time answering it. Does that help, what I said? Are you looking for something else? No. Okay, all right. Okay. Anybody else? You?
Thank you. I enjoyed your lecture also.
Thank you.
I am curious about how you describe the motion that's present in this piece here. That connectedness you talked about earlier, seeing how each object connects to the other. But I'm really drawn to the movement that's happening in the shapes and the motion. How do you describe that force?
Okay, well, I read the piece from the center outwards. So the figure in the center is a figure. I mean, that's how I see it. I mean, this is not my recommendation for anyone else. This is I'm just sharing with you my casual interpretation. But I see the left side of the piece as being a side that's more focused on the metaphysical. So it has an upward energy or a radiating energy. So there are parts of the piece that shine out like this, or they point, or they go like this. And then I see the right side of the piece as having like a terrestrial energy. And so like that side of the piece, not only in palette, but in other ways like is grounded. And so it's like starting with the first, if your figure's on this side, and the first piece here is like what I think of as like a figure, and it's actually like its mind is like into the ground. And so like from there onward, I see that as like a very like grounded side. And so like some of the palette has more like clay soil, like there's some like browny reds, and there's some stuff like that on that side of the piece. And it has to do with like the groundedness of like the womb. Like it's like if the earth is the, I don't know, the uterus of you know what I'm saying? I don't know. This is all my association. But it's like cave-like. There's like embryos. There's toddlers. There's war. There's like, I don't know. There's like ocean. There's like all these things that have to do with like the earth. And the other side of the piece, like I feel like has an energy that goes up, more metaphysical. And we did that also with the palette. Like the purples, we felt like were more like mystical, more like alchemaic, more like metaphysical, more universe, like outer space. And then the right side, as it goes to those like black cherry, like they're like bruised colors, like bloody minstrel, like, you know what I'm saying? Maybe? Sorry. I hope that helps. Was that what you were looking for, or did you mean more like ballet? Like, I don't know, like what we're talking about.
If you had if within that
Yes.
and within your own work, is there a recognizable spirit that you see of yourself? You know what I'm saying? When you do your work, how do you know? And is it the same every time you create something?
No, I think the thing is like when I feel anxious, like it comes out like in the work. Like it's like it has more to do with like there's a part in this work, there's a head that's being weighted down by these like pillows, and it's like the beads are coming out of its eyes and its tongue is sticking out. Like I remember drawing that like in a moment where I was like, ugh, like just, you know what I mean? Like I just felt it's too much, you know, because it is too much right now. And so I think like it comes out like that, but I think that there are other times when I'm feeling more peaceful that maybe I choose to make a more minimal work, you know, a work that like has like a more totality, that has more like peaceful energy. But no, I don't think you ever get over your hangups. It's just like it's a process of like mitigating like how you relate to your anxieties or your desires or whatever. It's like I don't think there's any magical medicine or practice or thing that gets you over that. I think it's like it's all about how you manage it, and so like for me that's like a daily, you know, that's why I have to draw all the time, so I can like make sure to pick up on what the zeitgeist is and like try to enlighten for myself like what my new hang-ups are, or like, you know, stay focused on what the old ones are or something like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Is that it? One more? You can just talk if you want.
As an artist in college right now,
Huh?
I feel like a lot of interconnection and interwovenness with my artistry and like the institution.
Uh-huh.
And you have a background in art in an institution as well, in university. How do you feel like you found your personal voice and your freedom in art? Because when you're talking, it sounds like there is this freedom. Of course, you're experiencing all these emotions still, but you still have this like, I'm like, wow, that's so cool when you're speaking.
You want the real truth here?
Yes.
It takes a long time. I mean, I had to unlearn a lot of that stuff, you know? But I think it's just practice, you know? I mean, I think there's really there's no golden, like, there's no crazy thing that you can do to figure that out. I mean, I think for me, like, if you were to look at my work, like going from 2000 on, like I went to Yale, so I was very privileged to be able to be chosen to go there, and I did make some professional connections there, which led to me being in the Whitney Biennial in 2004, so I was 28. And I didn't even know how important it was. Like I didn't even understand what it was, and I was doing pretty well. I mean, like institutionally and financially probably as well. And I made an exhibition in London. We made a book. I came home and I looked at the book and I said, this isn't the work I want to make. And I changed it. And it was not good for me. It was not good for my collectors. It was not good for my earning. It was also spiritually very difficult. But I would never have not done it just because it was going to be difficult. I was unhappy making that work. And so I think like really the most important part of being a practicing artist is like just you have to really be brave enough to listen to what you want. And if you're unsure, you just either keep on or you stop and you find out, like go without and find out what you really need. You know, is it really important to you or is it not? You know, and so I have a lot of friends who still practice, but I know it's painful. You know, but I think that like, I don't know, it's not easy. And I think like you know, everyone's dream who's an artist, I think, is to be a working artist. And I feel very grateful to be one, but it is not easy. And I don't just mean like the money part. I mean, it's just, I think all artists are like so vulnerable. They're desperate to be loved or appreciated or whatever. And it's like, it's so much easier, at least for this artist, to like focus on the bad stuff and forget the good stuff. And I don't know, I think it's difficult, but I think like what's great about it is it's probably one of the only, maybe besides poetry, like places to work where like, your work will be a primary source that doesn't need to actually be understood like an essay or a speech. Like it's like it will be different for each person, and it's like and that's why we need it. We need something that's not like a clickbait headline or like like a like on Instagram or something. Like we need something that like you can stand in front of and like be comfortable enough to say like, I have no idea what this is, but I love it, or I don't, or it makes me feel scared, or and I want to find out why. And so I think like we're even luckier than the viewers because you're inside of it, and it will teach you what you need to know about science or politics or equality or whatever it is that makes you excited, whether it's your work is political or figurative or abstract or whatever. It's like those things, by practicing, you lead yourself to learn about yourself and about the world. And I don't think very many people's jobs are able to offer that. You can be a doctor and like help people and stuff, but it's different. So it's not scary, but it's not easy, Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for your question. That's it. Thanks so much for coming and spending time here.